The world that I envision by 2030 is Bitcoin at tens of millions of dollars, while adoption is still less than 2 to 5%.
Right. Interesting.
Supply and demand. So we're now living in a world where 35% of all of the available supply has left the exchanges since 2020. We have 5 years of consistent data of coins leaving the exchanges. 35% of Bitcoin on exchanges, gone. 85% of Bitcoin on OTC desks, gone. And we also...
Holy smokes. All right. Welcome back to another Byte Federal podcast. Our guest today, Luke, calling in from Prague. Is that right?
Yes, I'm in Eastern Europe right now, and I'm really excited to join you guys.
That's awesome, buddy. We're excited to have you. So we were just talking before we get started here that we were talking about the Prague conference and what a great signal you had there. Maybe give us an update from what you experienced.
So I think there was somewhere between 5 and 10,000 people at BTC Prague 2025. So again, very high signal conference. The portion of the crowd that were Bitcoin maximalists was very high. And of course, whatever conference Michael Saylor goes to, he draws an enormous crowd. So yeah, the week leading into Prague was amazing. I'm a little bit too tired to be traveling straight after Prague, so I'm probably going to stay here for a week or two. But yeah, it's a great conference.
That's awesome. I've never attended. I would love to, but I always just am totally impressed with the speakers and the way they put it together. And like you said, we just get tons of great signal out of that conference.
Yeah, it's very high signal, very low noise.
Yeah, for sure. You're tired, but you've spent several years running around in a van to save money to buy Bitcoin. I want to hear more about that journey because I think there's a lot of us out there that have family and 9-to-5s and are envious of a young guy like you that goes out and just makes it happen to stack as much Bitcoin as possible. What was that experience like, and how's it going so far?
Yeah, so again, feel free to stop me if this story goes on a little bit too long, because I'm very guilty of telling very long stories. But I suppose long story short of why I was in the back of a van, living in a truck and a van for a couple of years, was because I was homeless at 15. So I moved out very young. And from there, obviously, I've always had to work 2 jobs while I was going to school just to try to save money so I could eat and survive. So I was always very attuned to the importance of money and trying to save money as well. So I think I got 2 years into university and I realized the entire educational system was a scam. So dropped out of university to start my own gym business. And I was essentially just trying to save a buck or save some dollars during those couple of years at university. So I crunched the numbers and I said, all right, well, I'm paying about $300 a week in rent. If I dropped out of this lease that I have right now for this rental property I was living in, and if I just bought a van for $2,000, I ran the numbers and I said, look, I could potentially plow thousands of dollars into Bitcoin. If I lived in a van and a truck, than if I were to pay for rent. So again, that was a trade-off that I was comfortable to make when I was, I think, 18 and 19. I think was when I made that move. And the move played out nicely. I think at the time, my friends said I was crazy. Obviously Bitcoin just crashed 70% from $20,000 in 2017 to like $3,000 in 2018. So it was certainly, it shook me around a little bit to make that decision. But once I did make the decision, I think it was a great decision. I did it for a couple of years and I definitely do not regret those couple of years that I spent living in the back of a van and a truck to stack and save more Bitcoin. And yeah, that's the story behind the van.
Well, that's super impressive that a guy as young as you were saw that future with Bitcoin. I remember that time period, and I was questioning myself. I was pretty new. I started in 2017, and the crash into $3,000 in 19 was a little disheartening. And you're like, did I just do the dumbest thing ever? Or do I just need to keep buying? And you're buying all the way down. And then you're getting into this point where you're like, holy smokes, am I going to ride this thing all the way to zero? Or do I know something nobody else knows? And I can only imagine doing that while you're living in a truck and your friends pointing at you saying, oh, way to go, Luke, good job. Must have been a little disheartening.
Absolutely. And here's the biggest thing that was so difficult all the way back in 2018. There was no good Bitcoin education happening in the space in 2018, which is again why I was pumped to come on this podcast with you today, Paul, because I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing at Byte Federal. We do need more Bitcoin only educators online. And I think it was the very few Bitcoin educators online that I found in 2017 and 2018 that kind of helps, keep me sane. I think at the time, the only real Bitcoin maximalists that I personally found on YouTube were old speeches from Andreas Antonopoulos and Max Kaiser. They were the only ones I could find. Obviously, I think TFTC started it in around that time frame, 2017, 2018. But apart from that, it was pretty scarce in the realm of Bitcoin education in the video format. Obviously, there's been a lot of great writers who have been writing about Bitcoin for decades, but especially on YouTube, very difficult to find, very accessible, easy to digest Bitcoin education. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
100%.
long journey.
Yeah, shout out to Tone Vase also. He saved my butt because I learned so much from him during that time period. That really gave me the self-confidence. And you're right, these educators, we owe a lot to them, and I totally agree with you. But you basically kind of keep living this dream of escaping this 9 to 5, and doing it in your fashion, in the Bitcoin fashion, and this break from traditional lifestyle to a more nomadic lifestyle that you're living now. What has that been like on Bitcoin? And if others are thinking about doing it, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, so my entire life has essentially been a tale of failed businesses in an attempt of me trying to escape the 9 to 5. So I went to university because I thought, hey, I don't want to work for someone, so I may as well get a high-paying job. That lasted 2 years and I dropped out. Then I started a gym, and that lasted for 2 years before the government came in and said, sorry, Luke, you can't operate a gym with your medical condition in 2020. So that failed after 2 years. And after, a couple of failed businesses and, failed ventures, so to say, then I found the realm of making money online. I think I made my first dollar online in 2021. And I think I left Australia making something like 1,500 or 2,000 US dollars. And obviously, that was a nerve wracking decision, making $2,000 and flying to Mexico, the other side of the world. That was my first international trip ever at the age of 24, I believe. But again, I took the chance. I just hoped I would figure it out. And eventually, it's kind of worked out well. And I think it's actually been the best decision of my life to leave Australia. I was on one of the first flights out of Australia in, I think it was late 2021 or early 2022, just as those international borders opened up again for the first time in 18 months. I was one of the first kids out of that country. And I haven't returned. I haven't gone back in 4 years, and I definitely don't plan on doing that. That's purely because the world has fundamentally changed. And that is because of technology. Technology now, for the first time in history, has made it possible for anyone to not only make money online, but travel anywhere around the world and live from anywhere around the world they want to and make money online. And this is again this is like a fundamental shift we've never seen in human history. Like for hundreds of thousands of years, each major technological revolution has centralized society. So for hundreds of thousands of years, we were hunters and gatherers. We were running around, we were throwing spears at mammals, and that was how we organized as a society. Then the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago changed everything. It centralized Homo sapiens to living in these big farms and these villages. And then the next big technological revolution happened in the 1770s. And for the best paying jobs and the best opportunities, we once again centralized and we moved to these big megacities that were at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, whether that was London or eventually New York. These were the hubs. But now the technological revolution we're living through is the biggest thing in 250 years. But what's really different about it is we don't have to centralize. We don't have to go into the farms and the villages for the best paying jobs. We don't have to go and live in these big, mega, woke cities for the best paying jobs. We can literally decentralize and go and live anywhere around the world we want to because we have our money protected by Bitcoin, and we can use the internet to do whatever job we want to do, learn anything we want to do. That's a very important thing. The world today is rewarding people who have built up skills, not bureaucratic what's credentials. Okay, the age of credentialism that died. It died in the 20th century. We're now living under a more meritocratic world where it is the skills that you learn online that's going to be most valued in the 21st century. So again, it's a
You,
little
you
bit of a
just you, you just
jump
gave
in.
me so much hope for the future generations, because it's so true that, but at the same time, there's that massive battle going on between using technology to try and control people more and to try and centralize more aggressively, as opposed to people like yourself that are choosing the alternative route and volunteering into this decentralized system. And that is so awesome. And I agree with you. My son did the same thing. He said, I'm not gonna go to college. I'm not going to go for the credential, and I'm going to educate myself. He can learn anything very quickly on YouTube.
Mhm.
My daughter's doing the same thing. She graduated from high school early. She's learning to become a mechanic and to weld, and real world skills that she wants to pursue. And she's teaching herself how to repair small engines now and make money doing that. So I love that you're active in that, in participating in that new decentralized economy. Um, but I'm curious how you see AI fitting into that for your future.
Okay, so multiple different things. You brought up a couple of really interesting things there. The first thing you brought up was skills. There's a quote
Yeah.
that still sticks out to me from my first mentor. I worked with Mark Moss for 2 years,
Okay.
and one of the biggest learnings I had from him, he used to always say to me, "Luke, just figure it out. In 4 hours, you can become nearly a subject matter expert on any matter you want to learn about. You can go watch 3 YouTube videos from the most educated people in that space. You can go read 3 articles from the most educated people in that discipline and in that space. And in 4 hours, you could learn 60, 70, maybe 80% of what the experts know about that discipline in 4 hours." And he was telling me this in 2021, 2022, before ChatGPT. So obviously ChatGPT, I believe, has only accelerated that learning curve. So again, kudos to your son. That's amazing that he has also chosen the internet way for the 21st century. That's really cool. I love that. And so circling back to your question, how does AI fit into that? I think AI is, I think, I don't think AI is going to be as revolutionary as a lot of people think. So I think a lot of people, they think AI is the thing. They think it's the next technological revolution. Like, for example, there's this 50-year K-wave cycle. It's called the
Hmm.
Kardashev's. No, it's not. It's
That's the
not the
250
Kardashev
year.
scale. That's the intergalactic one. We're gonna get into that later. I'm sure we are. I can't think of the Russian
It's a
economist's name.
technological cycle, I think. I mean, that's probably
Yeah,
not the right word for it, but it's about a 50-year technological cycle, I believe.
yeah, I wish I could think of the guy's name, but essentially in the
You gotta channel your
1770s,
inner Mark Moss right now.
right? He's the expert on these cycles. Let me have a look at the actual name. We're gonna do it live. The Okay, I can't find it. But anyway, long story short, if you look at major technological inventions over the past 250 years, starting in the 1770s, we had the Industrial Revolution, and every 50 years, we see like a major technological revolution. So we saw steam engines and mass transportation in the early 1800s. We saw the invention of steel and electricity around the 1850s, 1860s. Then in the early 1900s, 50 years later, Henry Ford came up with the automobile, completely revolutionized personal transportation. Around 50 years later, in 1961, microprocessor was invented, which gave rise to the internet, the smartphone, the personal computer. And then if you go 50 years forward from 1961, it takes you to 2011. And a lot of people's kind of looking around, they're scratching their head and they're thinking, what's the next technological revolution we're living through? And everybody thinks it's AI. I strongly, strongly, strongly disagree with that. I think AI is just another tool of the tool set. I don't think it's as big as many people think. I've actually written a book on why I think Bitcoin is the economic singularity. So if you look at the ingredients that created the Industrial Revolution in the 1770s, I actually think the four things that happened before the Industrial Revolution are happening again in the early 21st century, but they're all facilitated by Bitcoin. Again, that's a broader topic. Maybe we can explore later if you're interested in that one. But to answer your question, I think AI is going to change a lot of things. I think those who don't use AI are going to be affected the most. And I think the people who use AI are obviously going to benefit a lot over the next 5 to 10 years. I think a big misconception is a lot of people just think they're just going to use ChatGPT and bang away a couple of prompts and they're going to be, Tim
Right.
Ferriss or some other incredible author. And I just don't think it works like that. I think you have to be, I think you have to actually have the skills to know what works in your discipline to use AI effectively. So
I
I'm,
agree. Yeah.
yeah. What do you think of AI?
I totally agree with you because you can see it in your prompting, right? If you know a topic really well, you can prompt AI properly to extract very accurate information about what you want to achieve. But if you don't know your topic well, you can't even prompt it properly, right? So you're already handicapping yourself, and it's like garbage in, garbage out. Where if you can put in a real high quality prompt, you can get really good information out super fast. So it is, I think, kind of like you said, a leveraging of your knowledge base makes you more productive if you use the tool properly. But where it goes in the future is going to be super interesting, right? So
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
I mean I do agree with you generally though that it is going to be those who can master the tool will be able to use it most successfully, and I think it's going to um, it is going to eventually lead to all of us being a business of one. Where it's you'll be a business of one, kind of in a network of individuals that are all doing business for and of themselves with this AI tool set, crypto toolbox, et cetera. So it's going to be exciting, and I think it's very much one of the many green shoots that are coming up in this fourth turning. Right, all these cycles we're talking about, whether it's the business cycle, the industrial technological cycle, the Kardashev cycles. All these cycles are kind of, if I remember right, are kind of landing here simultaneously at one big turning point. So Luke, let's think about these cycles that we're talking about, right? The technological cycles, business cycles, and this fourth turning. And we start to think about Bitcoin, AI, robotics, propulsion, anti-gravitics. There's so many new things on the horizon right now that are sort of like an unbelievable amount of evolutionary and revolutionary technology that seems to be emerging all at once. And at the same time, we're seeing the dying of an old system, right? So how do you sort of square this circle when you start to think about where you are today, how you're living today, where the world is going through this fourth turning, and all these new technologies? What does that future look like?
So I think there's a lot of confusion in the world today because nobody's zoomed out. And I think the world only makes sense when you can zoom out and understand where we are in the bigger picture. So my first article I ever wrote in the Bitcoin space way back in 2021, it was titled Bitcoin is the Big Bang to End All Cycles. So what I find really interesting is I believe the 2020s, this decade, could be our most important decade in our civilization's history. I know it's a big claim, but when you really zoom out and have a look at all of these broader cycles you're talking about, maybe someone might start to think I may be less crazy. So like in the 2020s, we're living through the end of the 90-year fourth turning, an 80-year long-term debt cycle, a 50-year technological cycle that has the name of Kondratiev waves. That's the name. I looked it up in the background. It's so similar to Kardashev. I get confused
Yes.
sometimes. We are also living through the conclusion of a 250-year revolutionary cycle, which is pretty interesting. And we're also living through there's another cycle, it's on the tip of my tongue, but I might have lost it. Obviously, 100-year global reserve currency cycle. If you look at, the global reserve currencies, every 100 years, we see it change. And that prompted me to remember a 250-year empire cycle. So all of these cycles are like literally unwinding today in the 2020s, which I think helps to explain a lot of the madness that we see globally. Like people know when they walk the streets or go out to their local shops, things aren't right. And this is obviously because of a number of things. I think money is at the root of all of these issues. I think the biggest problem facing the world today is the cost of living crisis. It's the retirement crisis. Nobody can retire. And this is why everybody just has that gut feeling that the world doesn't make any sense. And I think an interesting chart that was in one of Ray Dalio's most recent books, The Changing World Order, is the chart looking at wealth inequality. Now, again, before I even start talking about the chart, let's make a preface. Wealth inequality is a good thing. Like a lot of people will hear that statement and they'll scratch their head and say, that's not fair, Luke. That's unfair. The educational system tells me that we all know we need to be equal. And I think I don't think that's true. I think what we need is equal opportunity. I think it's a good thing that if somebody wants to start a business and work 16-hour days, 7 days a week, that they have an unequal amount of wealth. They should be rewarded disproportionately for the work that they put in. And if they create a business that makes life cheaper and better for us as a consumer of their product or their service or whatever they create, they should have unequal amounts of wealth. But with that caveat in mind, what I think is interesting is that wealth inequality today in the 2020s, it's actually at the same extreme as it was in the 1930s. Again, you see these wealth inequality cycles that also kind of go through 80 to 90-year cycles, which also kind of correlate with these 90-year fourth turn-ins. It's only in the final 22 years, the final turn-in or the final chapter in these 90-year fourth turn-in cycles, when the people rise up and they demand change and they demand that we reorder political institutions, we tear down the old, and we institute new institutions. This is fundamentally what the fourth turn-in is all about. And the authors of the book predict that this happens in the end of these cycles. And it just happens to coincide with the extremes that we see in wealth inequality. So again, I apologize for the super long, super lengthy answer, but I do think that Bitcoin is not only the solution, but it is the change. It is the change for each one of these cycles. I mean, if you just look at things, fourth turning, Bitcoin is a new political institution. It is rules without rulers. Bitcoin, I believe, will be the next global reserve currency. I believe that Bitcoin is the next big revolution in these 250-year revolutionary cycles. So 500 years ago, we had the printing press, which fundamentally disrupted the church and the state. So we saw a massive revolution in the early 1500s, which led to the separation of church and state. That was all because of the printing press. 250 years later, we see the American and the French Revolution, biggest democratic revolution in human history that gave property rights to a lot of people, which accelerated the 250-year progress that we've seen since the 1770s. And if you go 250 years forward from the 1770s, where does it take you? It takes you exactly to the 2020s. So again, I just think like Bitcoin fits into each one of these cycles that we watch unwind and create a lot of change today in the 2020s. And I think it's without this context of how much things are happening in the bigger picture, I think it's very easy for people to be confused and rightfully confused with what is happening, because the world is changing so quickly today. Nobody knows what to do. I think there's a good quote. What is it? There are decades when nothing happens, but then there are days where decades happen.
Mhm.
I'm reminded of that quote nearly every Monday when some just wild things pop up on my timeline. But what
That's so insightful. I had not really thought of it like that, and I think you did a great job explaining it. In that, if you think of the fourth turning as a time and place where old institutions die and new institutions are built, empires die and new empires are built, money dies and new money is built, governance systems, and then all these new technologies like we're seeing today with AI and robotics, etc. You have Bitcoin at the core of all of that. Bitcoin is a political movement. Bitcoin's a monetary movement. It's a governance model, and it's going to be the money that powers the future of technology. Right? You're going to have AI and robots with their own Bitcoin wallet. This is a I never really understood it from that perspective, but that that makes I mean, that really deep well defines why Bitcoin is so powerful and why it's so much more than a number go up. And, that's it's sort of like one of I think, I don't know, back in 2017, 18, it sounds like kind of similar time that you and I got started. That was the thing that attracted me to Bitcoin. I felt like it was the biggest, flipping of a table I've ever seen, where it's just gonna disrupt everything, disrupt every system. And I think you described that really, really well as to how it fits into all these points in time that are going through huge transitions. It's very exciting.
it is. I think the transition we're going through, I think, is going to be bigger than what most people think. I kind of teased at it earlier, talking about the economic singularity. But I kind of look at our civilization like this. I think there's like 4 to 5 main parts that makes us progress and advance and get better. So again, let's lay out the timeline. Before the 1700s, how much progress did we make between the invention or the discovery of fire 125,000 years ago to the 1500s? Really, we didn't change that much. I mean, sure, the agricultural revolution mixed things up a little bit. But for example, the max traveling speed of our civilization for hundreds of thousands of years was like 3 to 6 miles per hour. That's it, all the way up until the 1770s. Industrial revolution happens. 150 years later, we put a man on the moon, moving at 25,000 miles per hour. So again, my entire thesis is 1770s changed everything. Since then, we've been on an exponential curve of adoption and civilizational flourishing. And I think bigger picture, if you look at what happened before the 1770s to make that possible, what did happen? Well, we saw an upgrade in the energy density or the forms of energy that we used. So we burned wood for hundreds of thousands of years as our main and dominant energy source. We discovered coal in the 1600s. What else happened just before the 1770s? The printing press accelerated the decentralization and the democratization of information for everyone. So for thousands of years, we were just writing things on rocks and cave walls, and we had very trivial levels of written communication. But the printing press being created in the 1450s completely changed everything, and the number of books printed per year went exponential. So the amount of information our society had, like the energy our civilization had, went exponential just before the 1770s. In the 1770s, we also had capital. No, we didn't. We had kind of a birth of capitalism, so to say. We saw property rights in America be recognized and respected. This is why the Industrial Revolution kind of moved from the UK and kind of moved to America. Um, and then we also saw a massive increase in the velocity of money in the 1600s with the invention of central banking. Again, not saying it's a good thing, not saying it's a bad thing, but it did increase the velocity of the money for the first time since we really created, or we started using gold and precious metals as money somewhere around 5 to 7,000 years ago. So I don't think it's a coincidence we saw an upgrade in these 4 major pillars for us just before the 1770s. And I think it's interesting. Bitcoin kind of gives us the next upgrade. I'm calling it the layer 3 in each of these 4 proponents here in the 21st century. And again, I don't think Bitcoin is the 5th technological revolution or it's the 6th technological revolution. I don't think it's just another cycle. I think it is the thing that's going to create an exponential wave of adoption, like the Industrial Revolution gave us 250 years ago. Like Bitcoin increases monetary velocity, like what central banking did in the 1600s. Bitcoin gives property rights to all 8 billion people all around the world, and it brings 2 billion people who are unbanked onto and into the global economy where they can actually start contributing to global wealth. And Bitcoin also incentivizes the usage of all of the energy around the world. So I kind of looking at that as some sort of an energy revolution. Like Bitcoin is going to unlock the capability for us to become a type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale. I'm hoping that we will not waste any more energy in the future. And I think Bitcoin could be an incentive to make that possible. So anyway, like bigger picture, we have all of these cycles, but then we have an even bigger cycle, which I think Bitcoin is at the very core of. And I do think my controversial thesis is every single technological innovation over the past 125,000 years since fire was a precursor for energy money. And again, everybody asks the question. There's hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of planets and galaxies in the universe. Where is life? I think the reason why we don't have life is because maybe no one has invented energy money prior. Like that is how big Bitcoin could be. It's either energy money or it's extinction. I have a chapter in my book, Singularity or Extinction. Oh no, it's actually stagnation, singularity, or extinction. And again, a lot of people are kind of aware that we're living through the great stagnation. We've gone 50 years with very little progress in our material world. Planes are getting slower, energy usage per capita, it's decreasing. We've actually lost an exponential curve that we were on for 250 years. That was the Henry Adams curve. And everybody's looking around saying, all right, something's wrong, but what happened and how do we fix it? Nobody really knows exactly what's happening or where this leads. My whole thesis is it's stagnation, then extinction, or it's singularity. Like you said earlier, technology can go a really dark, scary way, or technology can be incredibly optimistic. And that's kind of like the whole thesis. We either have central banking and CBDCs take over the world, freedom and liberty is gone, and central banking and a digital panopticon is constructed by the globalists. That is one very dark future, which leads with us probably blowing ourselves up with nuclear weapons. Or the other more positive, optimistic route is Bitcoin liberates 8 billion people on planet Earth, and we actually become an intergalactic species because we can all start to agree, trust each other, and work together, operating under the one monetary system. I like to think that we're going to do the latter, but what do you think,
Yeah.
Paul?
No, I was just gonna ask you, I see so many, kids your age these days that are pretty pessimistic, but you have you always been this optimistic, or did Bitcoin deliver this optimism to you because you saw the light?
Oh, yeah, I got pretty black pilled in 2020, being in Australia, living
Uh-huh.
under that. I would suppose I have always had a optimistic uh, slant, so to say. Like I think I also interacted with a lot of other, homeless 15 and 16-year-olds when I was younger. And I can see that the majority of kids who are homeless that young probably go towards the more nihilistic path, and they depend upon drugs and it becomes an addiction and it's a feedback cycle. My mindset was always like, this is the hand I'm dealt. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to do the best I can. So I suppose I've always had some sort of an optimistic slant. But I think Bitcoin really saved me from the nihilistic black pill rabbit hole that I got in 2020. Because I found Bitcoin in 2017, but I didn't understand it fully until 2020. Like I understood it was a cool number go up thing that was scarce, and there were 4-year cycles that I thought I was so smart and I was going to trade it every 4 years. That was my very mediocre, rudimentary view of Bitcoin from 2017 to 2019. But then 2020 happened, and obviously I had a lot more time to think about the bigger picture. So that thinking thought process went from incredibly nihilistic and black pilled to then like zooming out the bigger picture and be like, hang on a minute, it's Bitcoin or nothing. There is hope here. This digital Orwellian communistic collectivist state that looks as if it's trying to be orchestrated or created on a global level, this has always failed. Like communism has never survived because it's a fundamentally flawed ideology. So again, Bitcoin did give me hope, I suppose.
Yeah, such a cool story. I feel the same way. I mean, obviously, I wasn't going through the hard times that you were going through, but I did feel like, there were very negative repercussions on the horizon from a lot of the things that are going on in the world, and it was hard to find hope. And Bitcoin was the thing that unlocked that for me and changed really the trajectory for a lot of the things in my life in regards to just once you start aligning with this hope that Bitcoin provides, it gives you a framework to start to improve your entire life, whether that's through fitness, through what you eat, through the way you relate with peers, to the way you relate with other people in our Bitcoin family, um, and it drives you to learn more. It drives you to become more engaged with what it means to be human and what it means to evolve and what it means in all these cycles. So it does, especially like having this conversation with what's happening in the world right now with Iran and Israel, Ukraine. It's really great to chat with somebody who's so hopeful and sees such a bright future because it's so easy to fall back into that black-pilled state where you're just like, oh, we're just never going to win. We're never going to improve. We're never going to get beyond these cycles of destruction and evil. Um, so yeah, it's really great to see you delivering that message. It makes me feel much better about the future. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I also like interacting with other Bitcoiners because, again, at the end of the day, a lot of the rabbit holes I was in 2020, they were pretty scary rabbit holes, like really horrifying rabbit holes of, what our leaders and politicians are doing behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, I kind of came to the realization of, hang on a minute, all of this could be true, but the best thing I can do is just simply help accelerate a hyper Bitcoinization. Because if Bitcoin takes over, it is going to give us the best possible chance of, tearing down a lot of these very corrupt, very politically aligned movements that are happening behind the scenes. And I think just destroying the money printer doesn't solve every problem, but I think it goes a long way to chip away at many of the problems that most people are, again, correctly identifying in the world. There are millions, if not billions, of problem identifiers in the world, but nobody has a solution. So again,
Yeah.
that's again one of the things I love about the Bitcoin community. Yes, we can identify all of the problems around the world, but there's no point talking about problems if you don't actually have an actionable solution. So again, that's kind of what gives me hope.
How are you? How are you orange pilling people when you meet somebody for the first time and they know you're in Bitcoin, but they don't know anything about it? How are you doing it in a hopeful and positive way as opposed to pointing out all the problems?
I don't do it in person.
You don't do it in person. Just leave it for the podcast.
Yeah, so I used to, all jokes aside, like, I used to spend hours talking to like one person, my friends, my
Hmm.
family members from like high school. I'd sit them down, I'd metaphorically and nearly literally grab them by the shoulders and start shaking them and say, look, you have to understand this thing. And I just came to the realization, like, look, I think people will reach out when they're ready, and it's just simply a waste of energy and time for me to be spending so much time explaining this stuff to people in person unless they're genuinely interested. Like it's crazy. Like now I'll rip a live stream, which takes me an hour to prepare, and 20,000 people will see it. And these are 20,000 people who are receptive to the Bitcoin message. Whereas previously I would sit down with one person in person for 2 hours trying to convince them that they have a problem and I have the solution. That's the hardest thing, because most people don't want to accept they have a problem. Most people don't want to admit they have a problem. So nowadays, my in-person orange pilling, it's typically limited to probably like 60 seconds. And it's only if the other person brings it up. Obviously, if I'm in, if I'm in El Salvador, like I tip people in Bitcoin, I only tip people in Bitcoin. I say, hey, you did a great job cooking this steak or making that coffee. I want to give you money. I want to tip you extra, but you have to download a Bitcoin wallet because I don't have any fake money. So like I'll go on that little pitch and spiel when I'm in El Salvador or somewhere that adopts Bitcoin. But for me, my orange pilling right now in person, if someone's genuinely curious, they start asking me questions, I don't answer their questions. I literally just say, all right, I'll answer your questions in a moment, but I think it's easier to actually demonstrate what Bitcoin is first. So then I get them download a Lightning wallet. I send them some sats. And as it's sending, I'm saying, I'm sending you like $10 of Bitcoin. You could be on the other side of the world. You show me that QR code and it doesn't matter. As long as you have a $50 smartphone, I can send value from me to you, irrespective of what country, nation, race, or religion that you abide by. And the really cool thing is that your government doesn't know you own it. I paid $0 in fees on that transaction, and the government can't tax it, trace it, or track it. That's what Bitcoin is. Now let me answer your question. And like,
Mm-hmm.
if someone's not interested by that 30-second pitch and seeing the Bitcoin arrive instantly in their wallet, like there's no point in me going further. And I just kind of leave it there. I say, enjoy the rest of your day. Don't sell that
Right.
Bitcoin. It's going to be worth a lot of money in the future. But yeah,
Yeah.
what about you, Paul? What is your
Well, I've
in-person?
heard, I had, I've kind of come to the similar understanding, because I did spend a lot of time pounding people over the head with Bitcoin, and it just didn't work. And, just probably they would take the opposite side just to spite me. Um, and I have found that probably the best thing you can do, and I forget who said this, but I listened to somebody say, the best thing you can do is just go outside and water your own lawn. Meaning improve your life, set an example, have the greenest lawn in the neighborhood. And everyone was like, how do you do that? So it's that kind of ideology is, don't lead with Bitcoin, lead with being a good person, and get people that want to be around you because they like you as an individual, they like what you're doing, or they appreciate something you've done. And then from there, Bitcoin is just a part of that story, and they want to find out more. So that's, I do the same thing. I leave my ranting and raving and yelling at people from behind the screen.
You need to tweet that before I steal it, Paul. I love
That's all
that.
right. Steal it. It's all
Yeah,
good.
that's really good. I like that. I like to live in a similar kind of way as well. Like I think when I first was leaving Australia, in 2022, everybody would tell me why I was going to get stabbed in Mexico, or why it was a terrible idea, or why it would make me bankrupt. So what do you mean you're only making $2,000 a month and you're going to travel the world? Like, that's a crazy idea. I was only met with skepticism. And like, since then, I just gone my own way. Like, haven't actively tried to maintain any communications with any of my old friends from Australia. And like, you'll see it every month or two, people reach out and they say, oh, that's cool. Oh, you're doing this. Oh, you're doing that. People slowly want to become interesting as, what did you say? My grass is getting greener. I'm watering my own yard and taking care of my own life. And I think that's a great analogy there. You be the change that you want to be in the world. And when people see that your life is changing for the better exponentially, all of a sudden people want to know, hey, what's happening? What's changed?
Yeah. Another kind of intuition and slash message that I received recently was that if you don't run to the future you want, which it sounds like you've done this very early on, but if you don't run to the future you want, um, the universe is going to stuff you into that in the worst possible way. like,
Mm,
like you're going to get exactly what you want. You're just not going to get it under the circumstances and the environment that you want it in. So, um, it seems to be really good advice when you get to my age and you see how many times you kind of sat in between these two worlds, and then eventually the universe just throws you into the world you're supposed to be in, and you just kind of fall into a kind of a chaotic state, which is, I think, kind of what we're going through globally right now with this fourth turning, is that there's a bunch of people that are not running to the future. They're going to wait to get shoved into the future, and not be prepared for it. Um, so I think to the extent that any of us can sort of say, look at where things are going, and let's proactively, even though it's uncomfortable, I feel like I'm not ready for it. Maybe I don't feel like I'll ever be able to be an AI master or whatever. Just run into it and go do it. And then you'll be prepared for it. But if you're too afraid to ever start, it seems like you just get thrown into it anyways, and you're gonna fail at it because it's what's
Mm,
coming no matter what.
yeah, so I think a lot of people are gonna be sadly caught off guard at what's going to happen over the next 15 years. Like, I
Yeah.
genuinely believe we're going to see more change in the next 50 years than we saw in the past 50,000 years. And this is why I fundamentally believe that all of these models predicting diminishing returns in Bitcoin, or a power law return in Bitcoin, I think all of these are going to get broken to the upside, because,
Mm.
again, to our earlier conversation, Bitcoin is the economic singularity, and technology
Mhm.
today is on this exponential curve. And to your point, people are not going to be prepared for what the world throws at them over the next 10 or 15 years. It's, run towards what
Is
you
this
want.
sort of align with your suffocation supply suffocation theory?
Yeah, so I've got spicy takes on the supply suffocation.
Yeah,
So
I'd love to hear
I
it.
I wrote an article in 2021, different article to the one I mentioned earlier, but I kind of said the entire thesis of the article was Bitcoin's a technology. Technologies get adopted in exponential curves. And the thesis was Bitcoin had an inflection point in 2020. So in 2021, we had 1 year of data showing that for the first time in Bitcoin's life, Bitcoin on exchanges started to decrease. At the time, something like 2 to 300,000 Bitcoin had left the exchanges. And again, this was the first time we'd seen this consistent data emerge. And I said it is because of the billionaires like Michael Saylor, Tesla, world's richest man, putting it on the balance sheet of Tesla, and SpaceX, a private company, and Bukele entering Bitcoin in early 2021. I said we're now going to see billionaire, nation state, corporate FOMO, uh, you know, like nobody has ever seen before. Again, I wrote this in 2021. I got called a moron, but I essentially said, like, look, this is going to continue, and I think it's all over by 2030. I said I strongly believe we're now in a different era for Bitcoin. We're in era number two. Era number two is 2020 to 2031. Era number one was 2009 to 2020. So between 2009 and 2020, we only saw the number of Bitcoin on exchanges rise. So it rose from 0 to 3.1 million coins. And that's because people didn't understand what Bitcoin was. People were trading their Bitcoin for a Lambo in 2017. And what's really interesting is we also had a difference in the demand for Bitcoin. Pre-2020, before 2020, there was no demand from Bitcoin from billionaires, nation states, pension funds, public corporates, any of the big money that actually controls the majority of that big pool of $900 trillion of global wealth. So post 2020, both of those have completely flipped, supply and demand. So we're now living in a world where 35% of all of the available supply has left the exchanges since 2020. We have 5 years of consistent data of coins leaving the exchanges. 35% of Bitcoin on exchanges, gone. 85% of Bitcoin on OTC desks, gone. And we also have a completely different realm when it comes to demand. We now have the market being dominated by billionaires, nation states, corporates, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. So I strongly believe that anybody believing that the data, the 11 years of data between 2009 and 2020, can be extrapolated forwards in a power law chart, or, we're living through diminishing returns because we have 3 arbitrary data points in Bitcoin 16 years. I think a lot of us are going to be really set up to be surprised by what happens in Bitcoin's next 10 or 15 years. Because I just fundamentally believe we're living through a supply shock. And I think by 2030, about 2028, 2029, we're going to have no Bitcoin on exchanges. And then we're going to find out what is the real price or the real value of Bitcoin. And that is when I think things get really interesting really quickly. Again, who knows? Maybe we got no Bitcoin on exchanges sooner, because right now, 100,000 Bitcoins leaving the exchanges every single month. That's been going on for 6 months in a row now, since November 2024. So who knows? Maybe we get there quicker. But yeah, to answer your question, I do believe we're living through a supply suffocation. And I think the supply suffocation is going to be the trigger to highlight the fact that Bitcoin is an exponential technology. And typically for technologies to go exponential, they have to reach an inflection point, or an inflection point is reached that triggers an escape velocity in the adoption of any new technology. Like this is just a standard S-curve. Automobiles, smartphones, personal computers, internets, all of these technologies we've adopted go through an S-curve. Bitcoin's going to be the same. And it's just my thesis, the supply suffocation is the inflection point on Bitcoin's adoption curve that's going to send it exponential.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that you see the pricing model following the S curve also.
Yes. Yes. But it's going to be, there's so many differences and caveats
Right.
with Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's interesting that in this cycle, like so much of the new supply is coming from old wallets, like really, really big holdings, like individual whales that maybe it just got to a point where it's like, I've got so much Bitcoin that I need to diversify into something else, or I want to provide, an estate for the family that is X amount of acres or whatever it might be, right? So it seems to be that they are some very large wallets that are providing the liquidity these days. Because even if you remove that, then I think, like you said, the exchange balances would be drained pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting is it's normally these long-term holders, these big whales, that
Mm-hmm.
mark the tops in every Bitcoin cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So typically long-term holders are the smart money. And when
Right.
Bitcoin gets above an all-time high, we typically have a 6 to 9 month period of long-term holders selling coins on the market, taking profits as Bitcoin hits a new all-time high. That's natural. And what happens is the short-term holders, that is retail, come in and buy the bags and they buy the top. This happens every single cycle. But what's fascinating this cycle is the old whales are selling their coins. So the Bitcoin OGs who believe in all of these cycles of diminishing returns and power law and all of this stuff, a lot of them have been selling aggressively since 70K, but very aggressively at 100K. But what's actually different this cycle, and it is different this time, is that we have an explosion of new whales. So what we're seeing is instead of the short-term holders and the new entrants into the space being retail morons looking to make a quick buck, is the short-term holders this time is entities like BlackRock, the 130 public companies that hold 900,000 coins today, the expanding balance sheets of nation states and sovereign wealth funds accumulating Bitcoin. So this cycle is interesting because if the idea that long-term holders selling marks the top, well, that would mean that BlackRock, the public corporates, the billionaires, and all of these nation states adopting Bitcoin are the dumb money. I don't
Yeah.
know that's true. If I had to guess, I feel like this is just the beginning of this cycle. But that's just my guess.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you do get this sense like that Wall Street is acting a lot like retail in 2017. When Bitcoin eclipsed $1,500 a coin and was making all-time highs, and retail came piling in all the way up to 20,000. You almost get the sense that that's where Wall Street is right now in this cycle.
So I've got a conspiratorial take.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I actually think Wall Street has been preparing for this for about 3 years.
Okay.
I think Wall Street absolutely crapped their pants when Bitcoin rallied from 10K to 60K in 2021. And I do find it really interesting that we had that concerted effort to attack Bitcoin in early 2021. China banned Bitcoin mining as it was going parabolic. Again, Elon Musk, a couple of months after he puts $1.5 billion of Bitcoin on Tesla's balance sheet and starts accepting it for payment for Teslas, a couple of weeks later, he comes out and he says, yeah, you know what? He didn't say this, but just after China banned Bitcoin mining, he comes out and he says, yeah, Bitcoin's dirty. Bitcoin mining is dirty and wasteful. So I'm also going to stop accepting Bitcoin for payment, but he didn't sell his Bitcoin stash.
Right.
Then we also saw the World Economic Forum start attacking proof of work mining and endorsing Ethereum and proof of stake mining. We also saw BlackRock start talking about ESG scoring and all of this ESG FUD. And all of this happened as Bitcoin was starting to run away from us and the billionaires.
Right. Interesting.
And I almost feel like that price attack has given these guys enough time to accumulate for the past 3 to 4 years. And I think in their minds, they think that Bitcoin at $90,000, $100,000 is still cheap, because in 2020, it ran from 10K to 65K, and they saw just how quickly it could have gotten away from them if they didn't aggressively attack the price and accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. Now, the speculative attack there, like that all happened, like the WEF, the ESG, the BlackRock. Let's not forget FTX, very politically connected guy who was actively shorting Bitcoin. Like, we have the phone transcripts of him talking to his head trader, Caroline Ellison, during the FTX collapse. He actively said, every single time Bitcoin gets above $20,000, sell as much as you've got. Sell it all, sell it all, sell it all. Almost as if he was actively suppressing the price. And let's not forget, when FTX went bankrupt, he was supposed to be sitting on 80,000 Bitcoin for his clients. 80,000 coins. Guess how much he was sitting on? 0. So he was naked selling Bitcoin in the background. And again, that's just all fact. Like, that all happened between 2021 and 2022. My speculation is, I'm just putting dots together. I'm saying it's interesting that for the first time in Bitcoin's life, we've seen 2 partial bull runs where we've seen Bitcoin leaving the exchanges. So 2021 and now the beginning here in 2024, 2025. And we saw the first bear market in 2022 with Bitcoin leaving the exchanges. This never happened pre-2020. Never, ever, ever, ever. So I'm just saying there's been a consistent supply suffocation since 2020. All of this attack happened. This is interesting. And then obviously BlackRock comes out, starts endorsing Bitcoin in mid-2023. And we start getting all of the internal papers that BlackRock was writing for its clients in 2022, where BlackRock was saying the optimal allocation to Bitcoin between 2011 and 2021 was 85% Bitcoin. They said you should only have 15% of your money in the trash, such as equity markets and bond markets. This is BlackRock's recommendations.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, right. And this is the private papers that were writing in 2022, giving to their clients. So BlackRock's writing these papers for their clients before they launch a Bitcoin ETF in mid-2023. And then we have this whole entire ESG FUD campaign in 2021 and 2022. It just...
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think those dots, that falls right in line with a lot of the things that I've been thinking. And one of the things that kind of clued me into this was that at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, when Trump said, "Congratulations, Bitcoiners," it wasn't like, "Wow, you guys really figured something out. This is amazing." It was kind of like, "You're still here. Congratulations, because we're going to run this thing." Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
I never connected that dot. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it was a really interesting choice of language.
The devil is always in the detail.
Yeah, exactly. So with the supply suffocation, and the way you're thinking about this, do you see this now? Like, do you see the 4-year cycle breaking? Do you think it's muted? Do you think it still exists? Where are you at in that thought process?
Yeah, so again, back to that 2021 article I wrote. Again, it's a free article. Anyone can go read it online. I said, no, there in life there is no such thing as a certainty. There is only a probability. And at the time in 2021, everybody was raging about this stock to flow model. I said, no, it's going to break inevitably. In 2021, I said there was a 30% chance it's going to break because Bitcoin is now a macro asset. And what's funny is it broke, but it broke to the downside because the Fed raised interest rates at the fastest rate in history in 2021. So I said, look, there's a 30% chance it's going to break in 2021. This cycle, I think it's higher because the supply suffocation has been going on for longer. All of the fundamental endorsements we've talked about in this podcast, I think has accelerated the timeline. And I think there's like a 50 to 60, maybe 65% chance we break it to the upside this cycle. So that would mean Bitcoin like breaking 250. I think somewhere around 200 is kind of like would be considered a typical cycle. If you look at returns from the bottom to the top, that would kind of validate the diminishing returns theory. If Bitcoin tops somewhere around like 150 to 200. But I think there's a 50 to 65% chance we break that to the upside this cycle. And if we don't do it this cycle, then my probabilities of it happening in the 2028, 2029 cycle would be higher again. If the supply suffocation continues to accelerate, and if we're still seeing a lot of bullish tailwinds, I think the probabilities rise. What I encourage people to really think about is, again, I have no idea where the price of Bitcoin is going in the short or the medium term, and nobody does. Even if they're saying, I have all of this math and science to back up Bitcoin with a power law, and it's gospel. How dare you challenge the word of a PhD? I get really concerned when I hear appeals to authorities. So, yeah, whether it's the power law model or the quantile model, I would just really challenge people to think critically about whether models that have 11 years of faulty data between 2009 and 2020 are going to be accurate at projecting Bitcoin's price into the future when the supply and demand has fundamentally changed. This is my biggest gripe with these models. Money and economics, first principles, it's supply and demand. Why are we using models that have 11 years of faulty and different supply and demand data as to the situation we're living in today? So all I
That's a
would
great
encourage,
point.
yeah, I just encourage people to think critically. And there is nobody who knows where the price of Bitcoin's going. For me, what really scares me, because I don't want to be right. Like, I'm petrified of what happens if I am right. And the world is like, the world that I envision by 2030 is Bitcoin at tens of millions of dollars, while adoption is still less than 2 to 5%. And like, that's been my base case since 2021. I was called a real nutter in 2021 with that. But now it just looks even more likely. And the fact that not many people agree with that, that's what scares me, because financial markets always punishes the mainstream or the normies. Last cycle, it was consensus that we'd go to 288K because of stock to flow. And we topped at 65K and crashed to 16. So the consensus was wrecked, me included. I didn't think we'd top at 65K, no chance. So I think, again, consensus this cycle is we're going to top at 150 or 200. Are we going to break it to the downside again now that Wall Street has its bags packed? I don't know. But again, there are no certainties in the world. There are only probabilities. But for me, the probabilities of Bitcoin melting faces over the next 5 years, they're well rising exponentially by the day.
Mm. Mm-hmm. The one thing that you talk about too, and I've seen in your posts, is about Bitcoin eating the real estate market, and the real estate market, at least here in the United States, has been pretty soft for the last 6 months to a year, and doesn't seem to be brightening up anytime soon. Do you think that is going to accelerate a transition from say maybe boomer assets where they own a lot of real estate to moving some of that money into Bitcoin?
I have a lot of thoughts on real estate. So where do I even begin? So I don't think real estate prices are going to crash nominally. So like if we're pricing real estate in dollars, they're not going to crash. I think the governments all around the world have too much of an invested interest to keep the property Ponzi artificially elevated. And again, this ties back into my thesis for why I'm choosing to not live in a Western country over the next 10 years. because of the big word, the big 4-letter word, debt. A lot of people don't understand that because of the debt and the demographics of Western nations, the only way a government can sustain a property bubble of where it is in Australia, Canada, LA, and many cities in the US to a lesser extent is by printing money and devaluing the money. That's one big way. But a second big way is just open up the borders and let everybody flood in and get onto the property Ponzi. So, so nominally, I don't think property prices are going to crash because governments have that invested interest. But property prices have already crashed. You just need to price that in Bitcoin. So in 2016, property was 600 Bitcoin per house. I think the average home you could buy for about 600 Bitcoin. Then in 2020, 4 years later, one Bitcoin cycle later, Bitcoin's moved up an order of magnitude, and now an average size home costs about 60 Bitcoin. And then 4 years later, Bitcoin moves up an order of magnitude, and the average home costs somewhere around 6 Bitcoin in 2024. So in 2028, in another cycle, I think property is going to decrease against Bitcoin by about 85 to 90% again. So I think property has already crashed priced in Bitcoin. Property has also already crashed priced in gold. If you look at property priced in gold, most property prices and most property markets are down by like 50 to 75% in many major cities when you price it in gold since 2008. So in Sydney, property markets are priced in gold down by like 70% since 2008. So this is like a 18-year bear market priced in gold. Same in Toronto, same in Brisbane, Australia, same in America. So I think that transition's actually already happened and it's already taken place. And for me, the biggest scary thing that I see on the horizon for real estate investors is the fact that we have a 5,000-year chart showing us it's mathematically impossible for real estate to do what it did over the past 40 years again. So let me walk through the maths. So in 1980s, we saw the fastest interest rate hiking schedule in human history. Rates got taken straight to 20%, and they've never been that high. I've got a really cool chart I like to look at. It's a 5,000-year chart of interest rates. So interest rates got taken to their highest level in 5,000 years in 1981. And then we saw interest rates methodically lowered between 1980 and 2020. Every time there was a little scare of a recession, interest rates got slashed and the money printers eventually got turned on in the 21st century. So for a property investor, the past 40 years, well, the years between 1980 and 2020, they were the best years ever to be a property investor because rates were lowered from their highest level in 5,000 years to their lowest level in 5,000 years. When interest rates hit zero in the year 2020, that was the lowest interest rate level in 5,000 years. Again, people, zoom out. What we're living through today is not normal. We really are living in a very abnormal time in human history, technological history, monetary history. But when rates hit zero in 2020, for me, that marked the end of all of the easy gains for real estate. And unless you think interest rates are going to get taken all the way back up to 20 and then systematically lowered down to zero over a 40-year time horizon, then there's no way for real estate to perform as well as it did between 1980 and 2020. I just think it's over. And I think, again, there's $350 odd trillion sitting in the global real estate market looking for a store of value, looking for a safe home. And I think it's only a matter of time before all of this capital realizes that Bitcoin is the superior option. And again, I ran the numbers in that 2021 article. There's about a $230 to $250 trillion monetary premium on the global real estate market. So if you
Wow.
look at like the utility value of houses before 1971, when we left the gold standard, it's like a 2 to 3x of the average person's income. So I calculated there's $250 trillion of excess monetary premium in the real estate market today. And that's growing by the day. And all of that is going to be flowing into Bitcoin.
That's great. I mean, that is what we would love to see, people to own their own homes and not have them be astronomical, be able to provide more for people and their families, and move that wealth out of real estate and into Bitcoin. That'd be fantastic. Very
Well,
cool. So, one last question for you. about this cycle in 2025 with all your experiences, which you've had many for being such a young man, and it's really been a pleasure to talk to you. But what has been the most surprising thing to you that you've discovered this year in Bitcoin in 2025?
Ooh. Firstly, thank you for the kind words. Just want to give myself some time to think about that question because that's a great question. What has surprised me most in 2025? I'm 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 surprised by multiple things. One is one is the pace of embracement. Now, I'm again, I'm I shouldn't be surprised because in 2021 I said the corporates, the billionaires are going to take over Bitcoin. But again, I forgot that this thing is an exponential process. So in 2020 there was how many Bitcoin treasury companies in the world? Like one, Michael Saylor. In
Mhm.
2021 maybe there was a couple. We had Tesla, Michael Saylor, and maybe a couple of very small names. But now we're beginning to get on this exponential curve again because in the past 30 days 28 public companies have put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. That's nearly one new public company a day. And again, I've run some maths and some numbers on this. What's interesting is if you have a look at the 130 public companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet, the average Bitcoin treasury, again, if you divide the Bitcoin, you calculate it, you do all the maths, it's about 6,500 Bitcoin per public company. So when you start running the numbers, you say, all right, hang on a minute, this is scary. We're seeing one new public company adopt Bitcoin every day. We've got a month's worth of data showing that. All right, again, things could speed up, things could slow down. I get all the caveats. But if this trend continues for a year, one public company a day wanting to buy 6,000 Bitcoin, that's like 2.5 million Bitcoin worth of demand over the next 12 months. Again, there's only 2.1 million Bitcoin on exchanges. So I'm again, I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm surprised by the exponentiality of this adoption. Um, Despite predicting it for years and years, it's just cool that it's finally happening. The other thing that I've been surprised about is it shouldn't be something that I'm surprised about, but the infighting and what looks to be potentially another civil war in Bitcoin. The whole Bitcoin Core, Bitcoin Knots developments, a really interesting thing that I thought maybe we wouldn't see again after the 2017 hard fork block size wars. So that's interesting, and I'm watching that. Again, it's like a lot of people are like, "Oh, who cares about Bitcoin knots? They only have 13% of the hash rate." Hash rate, sorry. Only 13% of nodes are currently running the knots client. But I think what a lot of people is missing is again, it's the exponentiality of that trend. The number of nodes running knots has gone from from 2% to 13% in like 8 weeks. So it's
Mhm.
a lot of the core developers and the core Maximus are saying, forget about knots. It's only 13%, but it's the exponential change from 2 to 13. Like that's a lot. So I'm watching that. That's also surprised me. Um, my brain's absolutely mush right now. But I'd be interested. Has anything surprised you this year, Paul?
Um, that was one of them, the knots,
Mm,
and core issue. And at first I kind of thought, "Oh, this is a lot to do about nothing." Um, but now I'm not feeling that way as much. I'm feeling more like this could be building to another hard fork, debate in the future. And, um, I think the other thing that was surprising is, like you said, how fast things change. It was like like I kind of equate it to the assassination attempt on Trump. As soon as that was unsuccessful, seemed like every major big tech player uh, got on board with Team Trump, and the momentum shifted in such a big way. It almost felt like conspiracy hat on, tinfoil, the whole deal, like planned. Because all of a sudden everybody's a surfer and tan and eating meat and pro Bitcoin, like overnight, and pro Trump. And then we got the announcement, congratulations Bitcoiners, the SBR, and we're going to go all in on crypto and stable coins, and the pace at which this is changing almost feels like unnatural. So it like when you were saying about your conspiracy theory about the other cycle being suppressed for a reason, it kind of jived with what I'm feeling right now. That this feels like they're preparing for something far bigger than we could see in a normal adoptive cycle. It feels very manufactured to me. It doesn't feel like it's just, oh yay, we're into Bitcoin now and let's go. Uh, it feels like, behind the scenes, there's a lot of people talking about this becoming the next new thing and the new monetary order. And it's moved from us as plebs saying that we think this is going to be good for humanity to the powers that be saying we got to use this to maintain control. And
Mm.
if that's the case, then I think that is what drives that next hard fork discussion down the road, where we could see this battle between uh, Bitcoin for the plebs and Bitcoin for the state.
Mm.
I hope it doesn't get there, but that would be the battle that you'd have to pick a side, right? You'd have to decide. Hopefully, you'd have coins on both chains, obviously, but you would need to vote with what you hold and what you sell, and that could be the deciding fate of Bitcoin being a state issued centralized um, rail or a fully decentralized rail. And if we win that fight, then I think we get the Bitcoin future that we all hope for. If we lose that fight, um, we're all going to get rich, but not um, it's not going to be as good for humanity.
Yeah, I shouldn't be surprised that something like that happens, because obviously the only way to somewhat attack Bitcoin is to try to co-opt it from the inside.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm very interested to see how that unfolds in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think that the Trojan horse is behind the wall, and now it's a
Mm.
matter of like the fight is just beginning in my mind. It's not like, yay, we won. It's all happy go lucky. Everybody, the state's behind Bitcoin now. Actually, I think now we got to take it more seriously than ever. So
I agree.
that'd be my surprising moment for 2025, or maybe beyond when we finally realize this.
Maybe it's gonna escalate. Maybe the battle's
Yeah,
gonna
we'll
escalate.
see. Keep fingers crossed. Hoping for the smooth transition.
Bitcoin is hope.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And you've given me a lot of hope today, Luke. I really appreciate our time. You were great to chat with.
Thanks for having me on, Paul. I really appreciate it. It's always a blast.
My pleasure. All right, we'll be back. Tell everybody where to find you so that if they want to get more information, they can.
If people, yeah, you want to tell me I'm crazy, you can find me on Twitter. I also have a YouTube channel. I make daily content over there.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. Appreciate it. Like and subscribe. Come back to meet more great guests like Luke in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest Byte Federal ATM and turn your cash to coin. Byte Federal has over 1,200 locations around the country, with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, bytefederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.